Hey, paisanos!
If you've already seen my Monster Prom video, then you would probably already know how I feel about proper representation in video games. There really isn't an excuse for games that use creative characters or have characters that are designed to function as an embodiment of the player to not do this. Everyone deserves to be addressed as the identity they choose, regardless if someone chooses as binary or non-binary. Knowing that June is Pride Month, I have decided that I should take the time and make some Pride videos to help honor all of the different communities who face prejudice every day, simply for the way that they were born. Despite being a Japanese company, Nintendo has a surprisingly large amount of LGBTQ+ characters in their roster, and I know just the character to start off with. It's time to get off that couch, crack those fingers, and learn about those LGBTQ+ Nintendo representations in this episode of Gonzo Media. Before we begin, we need to go all the way back to 1987 and visit a weird Japanese exclusive game called Yumi Kojo, Doki Doki Panic. Doki Doki was designed as an advert game in order to help promote Fuji Television's Technology Expo, Yumi Kojo 87. Yumi Kojo roughly translates to Dream Factory over here in the States. Even though there is a lot of weird stuff in Doki Doki Panic, to the point where it really deserves an episode of its own, there is one specific character I would like to talk about. The cute red ribbon dino bird named Catherine. Catherine would eventually have her name changed to Birdo when Doki Doki Panic was modified into Super Mario Bros. 2, which had a worldwide release in 1988. In her original appearance, Birdo was actually a villain, and the game featured 3 different versions of Birdo, each with a different color and projectile. The normal pink Birdo that we all love and care about just spits out eggs. The red Birdo shoots both eggs and fire, and the final green Birdo only shoots fireballs. Are they all the same Birdo who just goes through Mario item upgrades? Or are they just more members of the egg-shooting race? The world may never know. We eventually know. While not the first instance of a queer character in video games, as both Le Crime du Peking and Moon Mist were released a couple years earlier, Birdo is the first LGBTQ+ character to appear in a Japanese-developed game. Actually, Birdo also owns the title of being the first trans character to appear in any video game, which unfortunately carries the weight of stereotypes that existed within that time period. In the English manual for Super Mario Bros. 2, Birdo, who unfortunately had her name confused with another in-game enemy, Ostro, has this character description. He thinks he is a girl and he spits eggs from his mouth. He'd rather be called Birdetta. This description unfortunately exists within all languages of the guides, with the only difference being the name Birdo prefers to go by. From Catherine to Kathy, for example. While being the basis of Birdo being trans, this unfortunately was the start of a lot of the hardships she would have to face. He thinks he is a girl is also an extremely terrible thing to say, and is an awful portrayal of a transgender identity. While I couldn't find any statement about why they chose to portray Birdo as trans, I do have a theory about what might have inspired it. Birdo seems to have been made to fit into a Japanese stereotype known as okama. Okama doesn't have a direct translation in English, but is used as a catch-all phrase used to categorize gay men, cross-dressers, or trans women. It's unfortunately a very derogatory slang term, and is an often used trope that is played over the top for laughs in many types of media. This unfortunately was very similar in the West as well, where offensive trans representation in entertainment was common throughout the 80s, 90s, and 2000s. However, considering Adam Sandler was still considered funny during this time period, I can't say that I am too surprised. Since then, Birdo has definitely become one of the more iconic characters in the Mario series, being present in most of the spin-off titles. However, Nintendo still has been pretty flippity and pancakey about how to portray her gender. In Japan, Mario Bros. 2 had a direct sequel called BS Super Mario Bros. USA, which used the Nintendo Satellaview. The Satellaview was a Japanese exclusive device that acted as a satellite modem add-on for the Super Famicom system, which is the Japanese version of the SNES. This game cemented that the different colored Birdos were indeed separate characters, all of the same species with the same name. Boy, is Nintendo lazy with naming characters with the same name of their species. That's like going to a town where all the inhabitants are named human. Birdo's first game of being a main protagonist was the 1994 puzzle game Wario's Woods, which was released on both NES and SNES in 1994. While not being playable, as that honor goes to our very own Toad, Birdo does act as a good source of moral support as she encourages Toad to destroy Wario's goons using everyone's favorite weapon, bombs.
And now a word from our sponsors.
This episode of Gonzo Media was brought to you by Bombs. Get a year's supply of bombs at your local supermarket today.
Some days you just can't
Get enough?
bomb.
Birdo's next appearance had her return as a villain in the 1996 Square title Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, the first of many Mario-based RPG games. You end up encountering Birdo in the later half of the game in a location known as Nimbus Castle. Fighting Birdo was actually a huge surprise for me, as the battle starts you off with fighting a giant egg, and after a while a giant version of Birdo emerges. During the boss battle, Birdo says things such as,
"Oh, I'm never gonna let you go. You're just too cute."
Not only is Super Mario RPG one of my favorite games of all time, it also acts as the origin of the personality that we will see Birdo have throughout the rest of the franchise. Birdo is a character who feels cute and loves to flirt. She is glamorous and she knows it. Birdo's next appearance was in the year 2000 in the Nintendo 64 game Mario Tennis. Tennis was the start of Birdo's somewhat consistent spot in the Mario Sport roster. Mario Tennis was also the first game that started a relationship between Yoshi and Birdo. While Birdo was likely put in the game just to give Yoshi a doubles partner, which is actually how everyone's favorite not in Smash character Waluigi was invented, their relationship was a wonderful creation that came out of it. You can actually see Birdo and Yoshi cuddling in the title screen, and it's pretty darn cute. Who doesn't enjoy dinos in love? In order for all of us to save time, I'm just going to speed through all of the spin-offs that Birdo has been in. There are a lot of Mario games out in the world, so being thorough with every single one of them, we frankly don't have the time to do that. Outside of Mario Tennis 64, Birdo is playable in Aces and has an unlockable suit based off of her in Open. For the Mario Golf games, Birdo is playable in both Toadstool Tour and World Tour, with Toadstool Tour introducing her rainbow abilities in her current voice actor Kazumi Totaka. Birdo is playable in both of the Mario baseball games, Superstar Baseball and Sluggers, with Birdo having a team captain position in Sluggers. Birdo appears in all of the Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, but she is only playable in the 3DS version of Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games, whereas she is exclusively playable in the archery event. For the Mario Kart games, Birdo is playable in both Double Dash and Mario Kart Wii, while also having a cameo appearance on the Women of Racing organization signs in the Nintendo 64 Royal Raceway. Birdo also had playable character status in the one-off sports titles Mario Hoops 3-on-3 and Mario Sports Superstars. Birdo has appeared in every Mario Party game since 7, and is playable in 7, 8, 9, Birdo frequents the Mario RPGs, appearing in the previously mentioned Super Mario RPG, the first Mario and Luigi game, Superstar Saga, and the most recent Paper Mario games, Sticker Star and Color Splash. Birdo also has a cameo appearance in Kirby Superstar, where she can be seen in the stands during the Megaton minigame. Also, while not exactly our Superstar Birdo herself, her species also appears in the Mario Super Strikers soccer game as a team member choice. A Birdo is also a main plot point in the episode, the Bird, from the Super Mario Bros. Super Show.
What are you trying to do, you wacko blade? Drown me?
Now I bet a lot of you are thinking, well, it doesn't seem like Birdo is trans anymore, maybe Nintendo retconned that away. Well, if you do happen to think that way, you are wrong. However, Birdo's status as a trans woman has been extremely problematic in the eyes of Nintendo. In the past, the company has tended to be on either extreme end of the spectrum. Nintendo either refuses to reference Birdo as being trans, or they go straight into using Birdo as an excuse to make a lot of awful trans jokes in her expense. In order to show you what I mean, I am now going to show a lot of the hardships that Birdo has had to face. We are going to have to go back to BS Super Mario Bros. USA, which wasn't exactly kind to Birdo. Being a Satellaview game, it featured actual voice dialogue, something super rare in console games at the time. The problem is that the game was still going for the offensive and over-the-top cross-dresser angle for the Birdos. It even featured the as-aforementioned Okama as the voice actors. It's not quite as bad as her next appearance in the DOS coloring game Super Mario Bros. And Friends, When I Grow Up. This game has Birdo locked up in a cage in a zoo for the entire world to gawk at. While obviously not intended at the time, this really hasn't aged all that well. Since Melee, the first Smash Bros. Game to use trophies, the Smash series has been really weird about how they address Birdo. In the Western version of Melee, Birdo's trophy just refers to her as a she, while the original Japanese version goes back to the terrible original description of, he believes he's a girl and likes to be called Kathy. In Brawl, Birdo's trophy refuses to give her a gender at all, and instead just refers to Birdo as a pink creature of indeterminate gender that some would say would rather be called Birdetta. In Smash for Wii U, they wizened up and removed the indeterminate gender bit, but they still decided to avoid referencing Birdo being trans. In Mario and Luigi Superstar Sega, Birdo goes from an ally to a villain when she partners with the thief Popple. She is shown having a strong infatuation for him, to the point where she would much rather make out with her bean instead of fighting our favorite plumbers, Mario and Luigi. Popple, however, is shown as having a really hard time referring to Birdo as anything, needing to take a pause before calling Birdo Dame. In Paper Mario Sticker Star, Birdo performs a serenade that alludes to her trans status, featuring the line, "Heart of a woman, heart of a man, both can know of love's grace." Birdo also performs a song in Paper Mario Color Splash, but that song is more about referencing Doki Doki Panic and the abilities of her beloved Yoshi. The Japanese exclusive Wii game, Captain Rainbow, is probably the most offensive towards Birdo in the modern age. In Captain Rainbow, Birdo is arrested by a robot for trying to use the girls' bathroom. Birdo, justifiably, gets really upset with this. And as the main character, a guy named Nick who plays the superhero, Captain Rainbow, to help prove that she is female. Nick then goes over to Birdo's house, which is appropriately named Cute Home, in order to find some proof. If you enjoy the color pink, and also eggs, then this house is definitely made for you. As soon as you enter Cute Home, you begin to frantically search around her house for anything to prove that Birdo is a girl. And after you look under her pillow, you discover a mysterious, vibrating object. An MVO for short. If you can't figure out what this titillating object is, then you are probably way too young to understand anyway. Somehow, this object is just the proof that the prison jailer needs, as presenting it to him brings Birdo her freedom. Captain Rainbow was released 11 years ago, and intentional or not, represents a lot of the issues that trans people still currently face with using public restrooms. It is still, sadly, a really big issue to this day, and it definitely was wrong of Nintendo to make a senseless scene about such a serious issue. A lot of people might not have any issues with any of this. It might even make the argument that Birdo is still being called a woman, so what's the problem? The problem is that just being properly gendered is only the start to being fully recognized. Trans people want to be called by their proper gender, yes, but to a lot of them, being trans shouldn't be overlooked. Overlooking their identity is pretty similar to sweeping an issue under the rug. Just pretending that it doesn't exist or that it didn't happen doesn't address the struggles people have to face. When a company like Nintendo still decides to make trans jokes, even though intended to just be innocent humor, it's still a negative way to talk about the whole thing. Making these jokes, regardless if they're intentional or not, shows people that it is okay to make fun of people being born LGBTQ+. We need to have more representation and less ignorance in all of our media. While I don't think that Nintendo is against the LGBTQ+ community, they haven't exactly been good about showing that it is okay to be born as anything other than a straight cis person. Birdo, being the first trans video game character, would be the perfect character to try to change all of that. I'm not saying that Nintendo needs to do something avant-garde like making a game focused on how gender is a spectrum, although that wouldn't be a bad idea. I just don't think it's difficult for them to address Birdo as being trans without making a joke about it. The fear of children not being able to handle gender and sexuality being part of a spectrum is a myth, as I feel like children just kind of get it. Games like Dragon Age Inquisition, Night in the Woods, and Monster Prom all show that games can feature queer characters and still be successful. And I feel like it's time for Nintendo to be more willing to express acceptance. And if Nintendo doesn't want to develop the game in-house, then they can easily ask another developer, like the people who made Night in the Woods, to make a cool Birdo game for them, for I would buy that in a heartbeat. Thank you all for joining me on this deep dive of Birdo, video game's first trans character. Believe it or not, Birdo isn't actually the only trans Nintendo character. In fact, she isn't even the only trans character in Mario. This character I'm talking about is going to remain a mystery. Until the next episode of Gonzo Media, that is. As always, if you liked my video, please like and subscribe. Also, if you have any comments or suggestions, please leave a message below and let me know what you think. I love getting feedback from all of you guys. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and remember to show your pride.